Alex, thank you so much for joining us on the Proof of Words podcast. It's great to finally get you on. Um, for those of you that don't know, Alex is the managing director of High-Tech Gründerfonds. It's Germany's largest venture capital group. And on top of that, he is a very, very avid Bitcoiner. I have one of the distinct pleasures of being the founder of a company I was CEO of that High-Tech Gründerfonds invested in. This is iconic, ended up becoming Deutsche Digital Assets. Alex and his team were one of our very first investors, so it's an absolute pleasure here to have you on the podcast, Alex.
Hi Pat, yeah, happy to be there. And yeah, I mean, you're one of the front runners in the crypto, especially Bitcoin space, I guess. And yeah, happy to be on the podcast.
So you mentioned this earlier, and I've tried to think about this, but I'm not maybe smart enough to rationalize through this process. But obviously, for instance, the US dollar was on the gold standard up until 1971. They removed the dollar backing of the gold largely because they needed to finance the Vietnam War. Or because they had financed it and now they needed to finance the Korean War. So they had to untether it to gold to be able to purchase more assets for the war effort. That seemingly has been the use of the dollar ever since then. The US has been in perpetual wars for my entire lifetime, it seems, which is very unfortunate. Or at least we've been financing proxy wars throughout my entire lifetime, it seems, for sure. Do you see a world where we can genuinely see maybe not a 100% backing of fiat currencies by gold and or Bitcoin, but at least a good chunk of it? And what does that look like? And does it work? Because when I think about it like that, I can't help but think about what happened with Luna, Terra Luna, where it was backed maybe by 15, 20% Bitcoin. The rest was algorithmic to keep it at the dollar. But as soon as somebody figured out, oh, by the way, we can really tank this on Anchor and send Luna to zero and have a great short position on it, could that theoretically happen to the dollar if it's only partially backed by Bitcoin and or gold? I try to think about it. I'm not sure because it looks a lot like Luna if you do that.
Yeah, that's exactly why Nixon in 1971 cut the connection to gold because there was a
Hmm.
risk that there was a run on the gold reserves, which actually was happening.
Yeah,
I mean, the French were sending warships over to get the gold, and then there was a risk that the gold was being depleted very quickly in 1971. So he cut the cord completely. So I think I mean, that's always the risk if you have a fractional reserve backing of anything, that if everybody calls in their money, then at some point it runs out, and
exactly.
that's actually today the case in the gold market. I mean, the paper claims on physical golds exceed the number of physical ounces by I think a
Oh,
factor of
don't tell Peter
100.
Schiff that. He'd hate that.
Yeah, so I mean, and I mean that's the whole system. So that's why you need trust.
Yeah.
So I mean, the only point where everybody would claim all the try to realize all their claims is when the trust is lost. So I think trust is really important, and that's one of the main jobs of politicians. And I think it's very sad that they very often don't tell the truth because that
Yeah.
erodes the key component of the financial system, but also the political system, which is trust. So I think even a fractional reserve does make sense because it's sort of a leash that
Mm.
controls the money creation process in a way that is not expanding uncontrolled. And there's very controversial discussions about the role of monetary expansion and inflation.
Hmm.
We do know in the long term, if the money expands, the prices expand. Not necessarily the CPI, because the money could flow to different, I guess, assets. But I mean, just if you imagine everybody gets $1 billion in their bank account credited overnight, clearly the prices would explode.
Oh
So I
yeah,
mean,
every
there's a,
Starbucks coffee would cost $1 million.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think having a somewhat controlled monetary expansion does make sense because inflation is very unsocial. It hits the poorest the strongest,
Yeah.
and that doesn't make sense, I think.
No, inflation is truly the hidden tax on everybody. I mean, everybody academically grows up going to business school studying Keynesian economics, that inflation is natural.
No, it's not.
It's not. That's just the truth. It's not the natural state, I think, of any economy. And this is I mean, I'm going to quote Jeff Booth here because this was his thesis, and I'm now a believer in it. The natural state of any economy, the natural state of any good or service is deflationary. And that's something I didn't understand until I was into Bitcoin and into my 30s. But that, I mean, becoming a Bitcoiner kind of opened my mind to, of course, Austrian economics, the whole school of Austrian economics, but certainly that assets by their very nature are either A, disinflationary or B, deflationary.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's a very easy thought process. Uh, Experiment. So you have 10 people around the table and everybody has a stake in front of them.
Hmm.
And then everybody has like $10 to buy the stake. And so everybody buys $10 and gets a stake. And then all of a sudden, one person gets another $20 before everybody else, and before everybody else realizes that they have now $20 extra, which is $30. And then they quickly buy up two extra stakes.
Hmm.
They have their one stake that they already have, and then two more stakes. So for 9 people, there's 7 stakes left. So what's happening? Not everybody can have a stake, and the prices of the stakes go up because they have 9 people, which is in that example $90, and
Hmm.
those $90 will be spent on 7 stakes, and then that means the prices go up. So if someone gets extra money and takes extra resources, that very moment there's less resources for everybody else, and that's what money printing does. So now add productivity to it, and there's all of a sudden not 10 but 11 stakes. So there's more stakes on average for everybody,
Hmm.
and that's what's happening all the time. And we have 1.5% or so productivity increase that should give you 1.5% more stuff.
Yeah.
And so inflation takes away what's being added to monetary expansion, and it also takes away what you should get extra on productivity increases. So it's not 2% inflation, it's also 1.5% or so productivity increase. So with 2% inflation, you lose 3.5%. And that what's being lost by the people is being grabbed by someone else.
Yeah.
And that someone else could be the government, not necessarily, it also could be those people who first get the extra money, like the Cantillon effect.
Yep.
So that could be banks, it could be rich people, it also could be poor
Well, it's
people.
the people that have access to cheap credit, right? Which is largely the banks and already wealthy individuals because they're using their assets, levering them, and that just gives them extra liquidity to go out and buy more assets. And hey, when they buy more assets, that just continues to compound inflation. And that's where maybe that's not a CPI inflation, but that's where we have the concept of asset price inflation, and that's still partially driven by natural what we call natural inflation in Keynesian economics, but there is no such thing in truth. It's
So,
very
so,
unnatural.
so to finish the point, if you add Bitcoin as a fractional reserve asset to the fiat currency, it creates a leash in a way that controls the monetary expansion. And I think that makes sense. It does make sense. So the
Yep.
compromise could be you might still have some monetary expansion, as you did have under the gold standard, but it's being controlled.